"Don't look under the blanket," she pleaded, but he did, and he stopped believing in God. Raj had always believed that life was simple, predictable, and guided by the rules of right and wrong. He was a man who trusted easily, whose faith in God had shaped every decision he ever made. People around him admired the way he lived, honest, careful, and thoughtful. He had a quiet life, the kind of life where mornings began with the sun shining through his bedroom window, and the smell of fresh bread from the bakery down the street reached him before he even got out of bed. Everything about his world seemed ordinary, almost comfortable in its routine. He worked at a small office in the city, the kind where everyone knew each other, and every day felt like a page from a familiar book. Raj liked it that way. He enjoyed small joys, greeting his neighbors with a smile, listening to the sound of children laughing in the park, and talking to his family over dinner. But the most important part of his life, the part he cherished most, was his relationship with Mira. She was a woman of gentle words, a kind smile, and a presence that brought peace to the chaos of the world. Raj had known Mira for years. She was his cousin and had lived in the same house since childhood. They had grown up sharing secrets, helping each other through hard times, and learning the small lessons life offered every day. Mira had always been quiet in a way that made people notice her more. She rarely spoke unless she had something meaningful to say, but when she did, her words lingered long after she had spoken them. One afternoon, Raj found himself in the living room of their family home. Sunlight filtered through the lace curtains, casting soft patterns on the wooden floor. Mira was sitting on the sofa, her hands folded neatly in her lap. There was a blanket draped over the corner of the couch, folded in a way that seemed ordinary, yet it caught Raj's attention. "Don't look under the blanket," Mira said suddenly, her voice quiet but serious. There was a tension in her tone that Raj had never heard before, a kind of warning wrapped in fear. Raj paused, the words lingered in the air. "Under the blanket?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm, though curiosity stirred in his chest. Mira nodded slowly. "Please don't, just don't." Raj could see the worry in her eyes. She seemed almost afraid, and it made him hesitate. He wanted to ask why, but something in her expression told him that the answer was not hers to give. Instead, he nodded and said, "I won't." For the rest of the day, Raj tried to ignore the blanket. He went about his tasks, answering emails, running errands, and even laughing at the small jokes his coworkers made. Yet, in every quiet moment, his mind wandered back to the sofa, to that folded piece of fabric, and to Mira's eyes when she had pleaded with him not to look. He told himself it didn't matter, that it was none of his concern, but human curiosity, he realized, is not easily tamed. That night, the house was quiet. The only sounds were the soft ticking of the clock and the occasional hum of the refrigerator. Raj found himself walking past the living room, drawn by a force he could not explain. The blanket lay there, harmless and still. For a moment he just stared at it. He remembered Mira's words, remembered the seriousness in her voice. "Don't look under the blanket." The warning echoed in his mind, yet the urge to see, to understand, grew stronger. He sat down on the edge of the sofa, his hands resting on his knees. He could feel his heartbeat in his chest, strong and insistent. He knew he should stop, that he should walk away and leave the blanket alone. But the pull was irresistible. His mind told him it might be nothing, just something simple, but his imagination began to spin stories, stories he knew he would regret even thinking. Raj tried to think about other things. He thought about his work, about the phone calls he needed to make, about the errands he had planned for the next day. But the blanket kept calling to him, a silent challenge that grew louder with every passing second. He thought about Mira's face, the look of fear and pleading. And in that moment, something inside him stirred, a mixture of doubt, curiosity, and the quiet thrill of breaking a rule. He remembered the lessons from his childhood, the lessons that had always guided him. Always respect boundaries, always trust those who care for you, always listen before you act. And yet, even as he remembered these lessons, he felt the slow rise of rebellion. He told himself that understanding was not the same as disobedience, that sometimes knowledge outweighed fear. Hours passed, and Raj sat on the sofa, staring at the blanket. The moon had risen now, casting a pale silver light into the room. Shadows stretched across the walls, and the world outside seemed to fade into silence. It was then that Raj made a quiet promise to himself. He would not rush. He would wait for the right moment, the right time to uncover the truth. He felt a strange mix of guilt and anticipation, knowing that his decision could change everything. The next morning, Raj tried to go about his routine. He ate breakfast slowly, brewed a cup of tea, and glanced at the living room from the corner of his eye. The blanket was still there, innocent and ordinary. He wondered what could be hidden beneath it, what secret Mira had tried so hard to protect. His mind raced with possibilities, each one more unbelievable than the last. He felt a shiver run down his spine, not from fear but from the thrill of the unknown. Days passed, and Raj's curiosity only grew stronger. He began to notice small details about the blanket, the way it smelled faintly of lavender, the way it had tiny folds that seemed almost deliberate. He watched it quietly when no one was looking, imagining what could be hidden beneath. His heart would race with both excitement and dread. Raj started to see Mira differently. She was no longer just the gentle woman he had known. She became mysterious, almost untouchable. He wanted to respect her, to obey her warning, but every time he looked at her, he felt a pull toward the forbidden. The tension between his respect and his curiosity became a constant companion, a quiet storm in his mind. One afternoon, as Raj was alone in the house, he found himself walking toward the sofa again. He stopped, his hand hovering over the blanket. He remembered the days, the weeks of warning, of inner struggle. He remembered the peace he had felt in his faith, the trust he had always placed in God and in the people around him. But now, he felt a different pull, an urge to see for himself, to uncover the secret that had remained hidden for so long. He breathed deeply, feeling the weight of the moment. The room was quiet still, almost waiting. Raj knew that this could change everything. He could feel it in his chest, a heavy, pressing sense of anticipation. For the first time in his life, he felt that he was standing on the edge of something irreversible. Raj sat down slowly, trying to calm the storm inside him. He looked at the blanket, at the folds, the soft texture, and the quiet presence that had haunted his thoughts for so long. He whispered to himself almost as a warning, "I will not rush. I will wait for the right time." But deep down, he knew that waiting was harder than any challenge he had ever faced. His curiosity was a fire that grew brighter with every passing moment. The blanket was no longer just fabric. It was a symbol of everything forbidden, everything mysterious, everything that his careful life had never prepared him for. As night fell again, Raj found himself back in the living room, drawn to the blanket like a moth to a flame. He sat quietly, listening to the silence, feeling the tension in his body. His thoughts wandered to Mira, to her warning, to the trust they had shared over years. And yet, the questions inside him would not be silenced. He thought about what could happen if he obeyed. He thought about the safety of rules, the comfort of faith, the quiet peace of routine. And he thought about what could happen if he gave in, if he allowed himself to cross the line and uncover what was hidden. The thought made his heart pound, his hands tremble, and his mind race in ways it never had before. In that moment, Raj understood something important. Life was never as simple as it seemed. Faith, trust, and rules could guide a man, but curiosity had a power that no lesson could tame. He realized that he was standing at the threshold of something that would challenge everything he had ever believed in, something that could forever alter his understanding of the world. And so Raj waited, torn between respect and temptation, faith and curiosity, innocence and the unknown. The blanket lay there, silent and still, holding its secret close. And in the quiet of the night, with shadows stretching across the room and the world outside asleep, Raj felt the first stirrings of a choice that would change his life forever. The story of Raj's ordinary, peaceful life was about to take a turn into the extraordinary, into a mystery that would challenge his heart, his mind, and his belief in everything he had trusted. And though he did not yet know it, the moment when he would finally lift the blanket was drawing closer, quietly, inevitably, like the approach of a storm no one could stop. The days after Raj first noticed the blanket felt longer than usual. Every sound in the house seemed louder, every shadow darker. He tried to focus on his work, on the familiar rhythm of life, but his mind kept drifting back to the living room, to the folds of the blanket, and to the quiet warning in Mira's eyes. "Don't look under the blanket," she had said, and he could still hear her voice, soft but filled with fear. The memory of it made him feel uneasy, yet something deep inside him refused to let go. At work, Raj found himself distracted. He would stare out of the window, watching the people passing by on the street. but it was as if their movements were distant and unimportant. His thoughts were tied to the house, to the sofa, to the blanket, and to the question that had been growing inside him for days. What could she be hiding? He knew he should forget about it. He reminded himself constantly of the lessons he had learned as a child. Respect boundaries, trust those who care about you, and obey the warnings given in love. Mira had cared enough to warn him, and he had promised her he would not look. Yet the more he thought about it, the more impossible it became to ignore. It was as if the blanket called to him, quietly, patiently, daring him to uncover its secret. That evening, Raj returned home with a heavy heart. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. He went through his usual routine, taking off his shoes, washing his hands, and sitting for a few moments to relax. But he could not shake the tension. Every time he thought about the blanket, he felt a strange mix of guilt and excitement. He knew he was standing at the edge of something he did not yet understand, and it both frightened and thrilled him. He tried to distract himself. He picked up a book and began to read, but the words blurred on the pages. Every few minutes his eyes drifted to the living room, and there it was, lying quietly on the sofa. The folds of the blanket seemed to hold a secret, a silent story that was waiting for him. Raj felt his pulse quicken. He told himself he should walk away, that he should respect Mira's warning. But even as he tried, he felt his curiosity growing stronger. Later that night, when the house had grown quiet and the moon cast a pale glow through the windows, Raj found himself standing in the hallway, looking at the living room. The blanket seemed to shimmer in the moonlight, and he felt an irresistible pull. He remembered Mira's face, her serious, almost fearful expression. But instead of stopping him, the memory of her warning only deepened his curiosity. It was as if her words were a key, unlocking a door in his mind that he had never known existed. He approached the sofa slowly, his footsteps barely making a sound on the wooden floor. His heart beat faster with every step. He told himself this was only to satisfy his curiosity, that he needed to know what she was hiding, not to disrespect her. He sat on the edge of the sofa, his hand hovering over the blanket. The air around him seemed heavy, thick with anticipation. He could feel the tension in his own body, a mixture of fear and excitement that he had never experienced before. For a long time, he just sat there, staring at the blanket. He thought about all the times Mira had been kind to him, all the moments they had shared growing up. He remembered her laughter, her gentle voice, the way she always seemed to understand him without words. And yet the blanket held a mystery that he could not resist. He wondered if she had been hiding something out of shame or fear or maybe even love. The questions filled his mind and would not leave. Raj tried to reason with himself. He thought about the possible consequences of looking. What if it was something he could never unsee? What if it changed his relationship with Mira forever? He imagined the disappointment on her face, the trust broken, the quiet sadness that might follow. And still the curiosity gnawed at him. He realized that the human mind has a power that no rule can contain, a need to know what is hidden, to understand the unknown, even at great risk. Hours passed, and Raj's resolve began to weaken. He thought about his faith, about the lessons he had learned from his family and his childhood. He remembered praying every morning, trusting in God's guidance, believing that the world was ordered and fair. But now the pull of the blanket seemed stronger than anything he had ever felt. It was as if the ordinary, peaceful world he had known was shifting, tilting toward something unknown, something forbidden. Finally, he made a decision. Not in anger, not in rebellion, but in a quiet, trembling moment of human weakness and curiosity. He reached out and lifted the corner of the blanket. His hands shook slightly as he did so, his breath caught in his throat. Time seemed to slow. The room was silent, the moonlight casting shadows that danced across the floor. He was ready, or so he thought, to see whatever lay beneath. The first glimpse made his stomach turn. It was not what he expected, not at all. It was shocking in a way that words could barely capture. Raj felt a wave of disbelief wash over him. He could not understand how this could exist, how it could be hidden in plain sight. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it, but nothing he knew, nothing he had learned about life or faith, could explain what he was seeing. For a long moment he simply stared. He could feel the warmth of his own fear, the icy chill of shock, the tight knot of guilt forming in his chest. He remembered every lesson he had been taught, every rule he had followed, and every prayer he had ever said. And yet in that moment all of it seemed meaningless. The world he had trusted, the God he had believed in, the moral order he had held dear, all of it seemed to crumble before his eyes. Raj stepped back slowly, his hands falling to his sides. The blanket slipped from his grasp and fell silently to the sofa. He felt his knees weaken, his heart pounding like a drum. He could not speak, could not move, could not breathe normally. The quiet room felt suddenly suffocating, as if the walls themselves were closing in. He had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. He thought about Mira. He thought about the warning she had given him, the look of fear in her eyes, the trust she had placed in him, and he felt a sharp stab of guilt. He had disobeyed her, and the consequences were now his to bear. He realized that some things are hidden for a reason, that curiosity can carry a price higher than anyone can imagine. Raj left the living room and went to his room. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor, trying to calm the storm inside him. He thought about everything he had ever believed in: God, faith, trust, love, and honesty. And he felt a quiet, creeping doubt growing inside him, a seed of disbelief that would not be easily removed. The world no longer seemed as simple or as predictable as it once had. He thought about the choices he had made, about the small decisions that had led him here. He remembered the nights of thinking, the quiet moments of hesitation, the slow build of curiosity that had finally overtaken him. And he realized that human nature is not easily controlled, that the mind can twist, turn, and bend in ways that even the strongest rules cannot contain. Raj lay down that night, unable to sleep. He stared at the ceiling, tracing the patterns in the plaster, but nothing could distract him from the memory of the blanket, from the secret it had hidden, from the reality he had discovered. The quiet room, once peaceful, now felt heavy with tension, thick with questions he could not answer. He thought about Mira, about their relationship, about the trust that had been broken in a single, fleeting moment. He thought about his faith, about the prayers he had said, the lessons he had learned, and the belief in a just world. And he felt a deep, unsettling doubt begin to grow. What if the world was not as orderly as he had believed? What if trust could be broken so easily? What if faith itself was not enough to guide him? Raj realized that life had changed in ways he could not yet fully understand. The moment he lifted the blanket had opened a door to questions, doubts, and truths that were far heavier than he had anticipated. And though he did not yet know the full consequences, he felt in his heart that nothing would ever be the same again. He sat quietly in the dark, listening to the faint sounds of the house settling, feeling the weight of his actions pressing down on him. The blanket lay in the living room, silent and still, holding its secret close. And Raj knew deep down that some things are hidden not to protect others, but to protect the fragile balance of belief, trust, and peace that guides the human heart. And in that quiet, tense moment, Raj understood the first truth of what he had done. Curiosity, no matter how human, can sometimes lead to consequences that shake the very foundations of life, faith, and trust. He had crossed a line, and now the journey ahead was one of reckoning, understanding, and coming to terms with a reality he had never expected and could never forget. Raj could not forget what he had seen under the blanket. Even during the day, his mind kept returning to it, as if the memory had taken root in his heart and refused to leave. Every detail was etched into his mind, the colors, the shapes, the quiet stillness that had made it so shocking. It was not something he could have ever imagined, something beyond his understanding, something that had shaken the foundation of everything he had believed in. He tried to distract himself, to go about his life as before, but the memory would not let him. The world seemed different now. The sun shone, the birds sang, and the city moved in its usual rhythm, but to Raj, nothing felt ordinary anymore. The discovery under the blanket had changed him. He felt a heavy weight pressing on his chest, a mixture of fear, disbelief, and sorrow. Raj's relationship with Mira, once easy and natural, now felt fragile. He could no longer look at her without thinking of the secret she had tried to protect, the warning she had given him, and the moment when he had crossed the line. He wanted to speak to her, to ask questions, to understand, but he was afraid. Afraid of what she might say, afraid of the disappointment in her eyes, and afraid of the truth that had already revealed itself to him. He spent hours alone in his room, thinking, questioning, and trying to make sense of what had happened. He recalled every detail of his upbringing, every lesson his family and faith had taught him, every story of trust, honesty, and morality. And yet in that quiet room, under the pale moonlight streaming through the window, He realized that none of it could prepare him for this moment. None of it could explain the truth he had uncovered. Raj thought about God, about the prayers he had said since childhood, the trust he had placed in a higher power, and the belief that the world was just and fair. He had always believed that good things came to those who lived rightly, that honesty was rewarded, and that life followed a moral order. But now, that belief felt fragile, as if a single thread had been cut, leaving him to question the very nature of existence. The shock he had felt when he first lifted the blanket had not faded. In fact, it had grown stronger over time, twisting in his mind into a complex mix of emotions he could hardly name. He felt disbelief that such a thing could exist, anger that he had been kept from knowing, sorrow for the innocence that had been lost, and a deep, gnawing fear about the consequences of what he had done. Everywhere he went, Raj felt reminders of that moment. In the streets, he noticed small details that reminded him of the blanket, of the quiet secret it had held. In his office, the hum of computers, the ticking of clocks, the voices of his coworkers, all seemed to carry echoes of what he had seen. Even in his dreams, the image returned, vivid and unavoidable, as if the universe itself refused to let him forget. Raj began to question not only what he had seen, but who he was, what he believed, and how he understood the world. The foundations of his faith were shaken. The trust he had placed in people and in God now felt fragile. He wondered if the lessons he had learned about morality, obedience, and honesty were enough to guide him through a life filled with secrets and hidden truths. He thought about Mira constantly. Her gentle voice, her serious warning, the look of fear and pleading in her eyes, all haunted him. He knew she had tried to protect him from something, and yet by his own choice he had ignored her warning. He felt a deep sense of guilt, realizing that some things are hidden not out of malice, but because the world can be too heavy for the innocent to bear. Raj spent days wandering through the house, avoiding the living room but never truly leaving it from his thoughts. The blanket, now folded quietly on the sofa, seemed to watch him, a silent reminder of the line he had crossed. He could not speak of it to anyone. How could he explain the truth without sounding foolish? How could he convey the weight of something so impossible to others? The secret had become his alone, and that solitude made it even heavier. He tried to pray, to seek comfort in the faith that had guided him for so many years. But the words felt hollow. The prayers he had once believed in with all his heart now seemed insufficient. He whispered them quietly, hoping for guidance, for understanding, for some sign that the world still made sense. But the silence that answered him was deafening. Raj realized that some truths cannot be easily reconciled. Some experiences leave marks that do not fade, questions that do not have answers, and a sense of loss that cannot be restored. The innocence he had carried for his entire life felt broken, as if a part of him had been exposed to something too vast, too complicated, and too inexplicable to ever return to what it had been. He thought about the future, about how he would live with this knowledge. Could he continue as he had before, trusting, loving, and believing? Or would he always carry the weight of the secret, the memory of the moment when everything had changed? These questions haunted him, lingering like shadows in the corners of his mind. Raj began to notice small changes in himself. He became quieter, more withdrawn. He avoided conversations that seemed too light, too ordinary, because they felt meaningless compared to what he had seen. He found himself staring out of windows, lost in thought, trying to understand how the world could hold such contradictions. Innocence and darkness, faith and doubt, trust and betrayal. He thought about the nature of curiosity and the human need to know. He realized that sometimes curiosity carries a price, a cost that cannot be measured in words or actions. By choosing to see what had been hidden, he had opened a door, and now he had to walk through it alone. The weight of that choice pressed down on him constantly, a silent reminder of human fragility and the limits of understanding. Raj also reflected on the idea of protection. Mira had warned him for a reason. She had known something he could not handle, something that could shatter his peace and his beliefs. In that moment of reflection, he felt both gratitude and sorrow, gratitude for the care she had shown, and sorrow for the moment he had ignored it. He realized that some acts of love are quiet and invisible, but their impact is immense. Days turned into weeks, and Raj slowly began to accept that his life had changed irreversibly. The world was no longer a place where faith, morality, and trust could provide simple guidance. Instead, he had glimpsed a complexity beyond his understanding, a reality where questions often outnumbered answers, and certainty was a fragile illusion. He began to learn a new kind of patience, a quiet resilience that did not rely on old rules or familiar faith. He understood that life carries mysteries that cannot always be explained, that human experience is filled with shades of gray, and that the act of understanding sometimes comes at the cost of innocence. Raj thought about Mira one evening as he sat quietly in his room. He imagined her smile, her calm presence, the warning she had given him so long ago. He felt a deep appreciation for her care, even as he acknowledged the pain of the secret he had uncovered. It was a reminder that human relationships are complex, filled with trust, love, and sometimes hidden truths meant to protect rather than deceive. He also thought about the idea of faith in a new light. It was no longer simply about rules, prayers, and obedience. Faith now meant understanding that the world is not always orderly, that people carry burdens unseen, and that life can be both beautiful and terrible at the same time. Raj realized that belief is not a guarantee of comfort or clarity, but a way to navigate the unknown with courage. In the quiet of the night, Raj often returned to the living room in his mind, imagining the folds of the blanket, the secret it held, and the moment of discovery that had changed everything. He knew he would never forget it, that the memory would remain with him like a shadow, shaping his thoughts, decisions, and understanding of the world. But slowly, amid the shock and disbelief, a sense of acceptance began to grow. Raj realized that while some truths are painful, they also carry lessons. The world is more complicated than childhood rules can explain. Curiosity, while dangerous, is a part of being human. And even in the face of doubt and confusion, it is possible to find a path forward, one shaped by thoughtfulness, care, and understanding. Raj began to rebuild his life with this new understanding. He was more careful with trust, more thoughtful in his actions, and more aware of the hidden depths that exist in every person and every situation. Though he would never be the same, he found a quiet strength in knowing that he had faced something impossible, something that tested both his heart and his mind. And in that quiet strength, Raj understood the most important lesson of all. Life is not always about what we believe to be right or safe. Sometimes it is about facing the truth, however difficult, and learning to live with it. It is about acknowledging the complexity of human experience, the weight of curiosity, and the limits of understanding, and finding a way to continue forward with courage and care. Raj woke the next morning feeling a heaviness he could not shake. The memory of the blanket and what lay beneath it still hovered in his mind, like a shadow he could not escape. Every part of him wanted to forget, to pretend that curiosity had never led him into that moment. But the truth had already left its mark, and no amount of denial could erase it. He moved through his day with quiet caution. Each task felt heavier than before, every sound sharper, every glance from people carrying unspoken meaning. Even the familiar city streets, once comforting and predictable, now seemed distant and strange. The world had changed for him, not in obvious ways, but in a subtle, unshakable manner that altered how he saw everything. Raj avoided Mira, though he longed to see her. He did not know how to face her now, knowing he had disobeyed her warning. The guilt pressed on him like a weight that would not lift. He wanted to explain, to seek forgiveness, to talk about what he had seen, but he feared words could not capture the depth of the experience. Some truths, he realized, could not be spoken without losing their impact or causing pain. He spent long hours in his room, staring at the walls, tracing the patterns on the ceiling, trying to make sense of the chaos in his mind. The certainty he had once held, the steady faith in a just world and a benevolent God, felt fragile. He no longer trusted the simplicity of right and wrong as he once had. The line between innocence and knowledge, faith and doubt, trust and betrayal had blurred. Raj thought about his childhood, the lessons he had been taught, and the prayers he had said each morning. He remembered the comfort of routine, the warmth of family, and the sense of order that guided his every step. But now those memories felt like echoes from another life, distant and unreachable. The experience with the blanket had shown him that life could be unpredictable, messy, and sometimes incomprehensible. Despite the turmoil, Raj realized that he could not remain paralyzed by fear and confusion. He had seen something that challenged everything he believed, but he also had a choice: to let it break him entirely or to learn from it and find a way forward. He understood that the journey ahead would be difficult, requiring patience, reflection, and courage. He began to take small steps toward rebuilding his life. Each morning, he forced himself to rise early, to go through familiar routines, and to acknowledge the ordinary joys of the world around him. He noticed the sunlight on the streets, the laughter of children playing, and the quiet rhythm of people living their lives. It was not enough to erase the memory of the blanket, but it helped him find a thread of normalcy amidst the confusion. Raj also began to reflect deeply on the nature of curiosity. He realized that it was a force that could not be ignored, a part of being human that drives people to seek understanding, even when the cost is high. While it had led him to a moment of shock and pain, it had also opened his mind to the complexities of life, teaching him that not everything could be simple, safe, or easily explained. He thought about Mira often, her face, her voice, and the warning she had given him. Slowly, he understood that her intentions had been rooted in care and love. She had known something he was not ready to see, and she had tried to protect him from the weight of the truth. In that recognition, he felt both sorrow and gratitude. Sorrow for the trust he had broken, and gratitude for the love that had prompted her warning in the first place. Raj began to write in a small journal, pouring out the thoughts and emotions that had been trapped inside him. He wrote about the blanket, about the shock of discovery, and about the doubts that had shaken his faith. He wrote about Mira, about the trust and care that existed between them, and about the weight of human curiosity. Writing became a way for him to process his feelings, to give shape to the confusion, and to begin understanding the lessons the experience had offered. Days turned into weeks, and Raj slowly noticed a change within himself. The fear and disbelief that had once dominated his thoughts began to soften, replaced by a quiet reflection. He began to accept that the world was not always orderly, that people carried secrets, and that life's complexities could not always be solved by simple rules. The experience with the blanket had changed him, yes, but it had also taught him a deeper awareness of human nature, trust, and responsibility. He began to approach his relationship with Mira differently. When he finally spoke to her, he did so with humility and care. He did not explain everything he had seen, knowing that some truths are too heavy for words. Instead, he acknowledged the respect he wished he had shown, the trust he had momentarily broken, and the lessons he had learned. Mira listened quietly, her eyes calm, and a subtle understanding passed between them. No words could fully capture what had happened, but their bond had shifted, growing deeper in quiet ways. Raj also returned to his faith, though in a changed form. He no longer prayed with the certainty he once had, but with a quiet humility that embraced the unknown. He acknowledged that life is complex, that understanding is limited, and that belief is not always a guarantee of comfort. Yet in that humility, he found a strength he had never known before, a way to navigate life's challenges with honesty, care, and awareness. He began to live more intentionally, paying attention to the small acts of kindness, the beauty in ordinary moments, and the quiet ways people care for each other. He noticed the trust between friends, the patience of strangers, and the subtle acts of love that often go unseen. These observations reminded him that even in a world full of mysteries and challenges, there is goodness, balance, and meaning. Raj also learned the value of restraint. He understood that some things are hidden for a reason, that not every secret is meant to be uncovered, and that curiosity, while natural, must be balanced with respect and awareness. He carried this lesson with him in every decision, every interaction, and every thought. It was a quiet guide, shaping his actions in ways he could not have imagined before. He began to help others in small ways, sharing his attention, care, and understanding without expecting anything in return. He listened more, judged less, and offered support where he could. The experience with the blanket had shown him that the world could be unpredictable, and that compassion and understanding were essential tools for navigating it. Over time, Raj found peace, though it was different from the innocence of his earlier life. It was a quiet, reflective peace, grounded in awareness rather than certainty. He had faced something that challenged everything he believed, and though it had shaken him deeply, it had also strengthened him in unexpected ways. He often returned to the living room in his thoughts, imagining the blanket and the moment of discovery. He did not dwell on it with fear or guilt anymore. Instead, he reflected on the lessons it had taught him about curiosity, human complexity, trust, and the limits of understanding. He realized that life is not a series of simple rules to follow, but a journey of learning, experiencing, and growing through both joy and challenge. Raj continued to live, not as the man he had been before, but as someone who had faced the weight of truth and learned to carry it with care. He approached life with a balance of curiosity and caution, trust and awareness, love and respect. And though the memory of the blanket would always remain, it no longer haunted him. Instead, it became a silent teacher, reminding him of the lessons learned and the strength gained from facing what cannot be unseen. In quiet moments, he would think of Mira, and a sense of gratitude would fill him. She had guided him, warned him, and shown him a path through complexity, even if indirectly. Her care had shaped the way he understood trust and boundaries, and he carried that understanding into every relationship, every decision, and every thought. Raj understood now that life is not about avoiding challenges, hiding from truths, or remaining in ignorance. It is about facing reality, however difficult, learning from it, and growing stronger in the process. The experience had taken something from him, innocence, certainty, and simplicity. But it had also given him wisdom, resilience, and a deeper understanding of the world and the people in it. And so Raj moved forward, carrying the lessons of the blanket, the secret, and the moment of discovery. He lived with care, curiosity, and awareness, knowing that the world is full of mysteries, but also full of meaning. He understood that while some truths may shake the foundations of belief, they can also lead to growth, understanding, and a quiet, reflective strength that carries one through life's many uncertainties. Raj had stopped seeing life as simple, predictable, and certain. But in that change, he had found a new kind of clarity, a clarity not based on certainty but on understanding, not based on innocence but on experience, not based on comfort but on the courage to face reality, whatever it may hold. And in that courage, he discovered a peace unlike any he had known before, a peace born not from ignorance or denial, but from the quiet strength of facing the truth, learning from it, and moving forward with a heart that had been tested, humbled, and strengthened in ways nothing else could achieve.